Baseball fans, it is time once again for another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. With over 50 years in professional baseball and making a multitude of fantastic relationships along the way, Frank Coppenbarger shares great stories with weekly guests from various areas inside of the game. It's all here on the Fans First Sports Network. Let's get ready to play ball. Here's Frank Coppenbarger.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. And you know, my show is all about relationships and experiences. And our guest today is a guy that has been a longtime friend of mine. He's had a great career in the game of baseball, a very interesting one. And I'm proud to call him a buddy and a friend. And I'm so happy to welcome Jeff Idelson, the former president of the Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum, to our show. Jeff, welcome.
Hey, Frank, the pleasure's all mine. I'm always happy to be with you and looking forward to rapping with you here a little bit.
Yeah, me too. You know, our challenge, we get going, our challenge is always how do we squeeze it into the time frame, but we'll do our best. But I want to kind of start at the beginning with you. I did a little homework on you, and your baseball career has been pretty unique, and it's a real testament to you can start basically at the bottom and work your way to the top, and I want you to tell us about that. So you're a native of Massachusetts, and you began as a schoolboy. You were a vendor at Fenway Park. How old were you when you started doing that?
Yo, Frank, you can get your working papers, or you used to be able to get your working papers at 14, and my parents made me wait till 15, but I was lucky in that I had a friend that knew somebody that handled the concessions at Fenway. And, you know, the idea of being at a ballpark and getting paid to do that at the age of 15 was, at any age, was pretty amazing. So I started at 15 and, I started with at the bottom of the rung with like the popcorn that used to come in the, the megaphones, and you'd be out there in the wind at Fenway and it'd be blowing all over the place, or trying to sell Pepsi when it's 40 degrees. But I love vending. I did it for 5 years, worked my way up, and it was a great way to really get to know the ballpark inside and out, quite frankly.
And to get to know the folks there too. That's and that came into play. So, as you said, you were a vendor for 5 years, and then you were actually an intern in the PR department after that, correct?
I was in college at Connecticut College in New London, Frank, and getting my degree in economics. And, you're winding down your college career, and you get called into career counseling, or you used to. They used to have a thing called career counseling where they'd bring you in the first semester of your senior year. And the counselor says to me, well, what are you going to do with your life? And I said, I really don't have a clue. She goes, well, what do you want to do with economics? I said, actually, nothing. I'm just trying to come to college to understand. Well, she said, what do you like? I said, I like baseball. She said, well, why don't you try to work in baseball? And I said, you can do that? I mean, this is before the internet and all those things. And I got lucky. I got lucky in that my mom actually got her hair done with Peter Gammons, his wife. And Peter Gammons was his longtime writer in Boston. And being a mom, she said to Gloria Gammons, my son my son would like to work for the Red Sox. Next thing I know, Peter's whispered into Dick Bresciani, who was the PR chief for many, many years in Boston. And I was lucky enough to get an interview, and I went from there. So, and I knew right away, Frank, as I'm sure you did, that I wasn't comfortable anywhere more so than in a ballpark. So.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, what year was that when you started as an intern?
Well, it was 1986, and I remember getting called into Fenway and sitting down across from Dick Bresciani and not knowing it, having no idea what he was going to ask me. And the first thing he said to me is, if I asked you to tell me a little bit about Roger Moret, what can you tell me? And Roger Moret was a right-handed pitcher from the Dominican. And I said, well, that's easy. I said, he went 12-3 in 1975, the year Boston last went to the World Series. And he is now in a catatonic state underneath a bridge, unfortunately, in Houston. And he said you got the job. So
Wow.
I got lucky that way, and started 5 days after I graduated college. And 86 was obviously a good year for Boston. They went to the World Series, so I was able to learn a lot and have a lot of exposure that year.
Yeah, what a way to start out. That's really great. So I also read that you did a little producing of radio broadcasts of Red Sox games, home games. Talk about that a little bit, if you would.
I will, Frank, and I don't think I'll be taking Brian, your producer's job, anytime soon, because that was a long time ago. But my job was to work with Ken Coleman and Joe Castiglione, who were the two voices of Red Sox radio in the day. And Ken had come out of Cincinnati and Cleveland, and Joe was out of Youngstown, Ohio. And basically, my job was to make sure the broadcast runs smoothly, make sure all the drop-ins got read, the commercials, provide statistics to Ken and Joe, and really just help bring the game to life in the radio booth. And I love that. I mean, I had worked in radio as a DJ in college, and being able to help those guys with a little more research to make their broadcasts a little more enjoyable was meaningful to me, and I loved it.
Very exciting. So now in 1989, you get an opportunity, but it's with the arch rivals, the New York Yankees, and you join their PR department as a full-timer. Talk about that experience a little bit, if you would.
Well, Frank, it was really at that time, at that age, the last place I ever would have wanted to go was New York, because I grew up despising the Yankees in Boston, and they were the villains. And I would say that Bucky Dent was like the antagonist in my life, and then I ended up working with him as a manager. But when you're in baseball, and you'll take what you can get, and honestly, the reality became that I wanted to work in baseball. It didn't need to be the Red Sox, and so I went to New York. I start just before I get hired at the end of '88, start the '89 season, and just before spring training, there's this little welcome party that a bunch of sponsors are going to wish the team well going to Florida. The trucks leaving, all that stuff. So I'm there, and I'm the assistant PR guy. I'm 24, and I see Mr. Steinbrenner there, and I say, oh, this be a good opportunity to just introduce myself and thank him for the job. So the job had come down to a guy from the Tigers and me, Frank. The assistant with the Tigers had resigned, and so it came down to the two of us, and he had more experience than I did, but somehow I got the gig. So I said to him, hello, Mr. Steinbrenner. My name's Jeff Idelson. I just want to let you know I'm really honored to be here as your assistant PR director. And he looked me right in the eye, and he grabbed both of my shoulders, and he said, good to have you aboard, young man. Good to have you aboard. You're the young man from Detroit, right? I said, no, sir, I'm the young man from Boston. He looked me right in the eyes, and he said, I have 3 words of advice for you, young man. I said, what's that, sir? He said, rent, don't buy. So like at age 24, I'm buying anything, but that was my introduction to him and the Yankees.
Well, I know you had another, you've told me this story before, and I want you to share it. When you were on the road working a road trip, and I can't remember where it was, but I know you'll remember, you got a call one day from him about some sort of a press release that he wanted you to do. And why don't you share that story with us?
Well, it's funny. You learn a lot from jobs, Frank. You learn like what to do and what you don't want to do. And I learned that patience was important in our line of work, and you know that. Well, he didn't have a whole lot of patience, Mr. Steinbrenner, and I learned that pretty quick too. So we're opening the season in Minneapolis one year. I think it was 89 or it might have been 90. No, it was 89. And I'm in my hotel room getting ready to go to the ballpark. It's well before game time. And this was the first time, that the hotel room, I had seen a phone in the bathroom. I thought, my goodness, I'm like in the big time here. There's a phone in the bathroom. So I'm taking a shower, getting ready to go to the ballpark, and the phone rings. And I wear glasses. I'm wearing contacts now, but I can't see anything. So I'm in the shower. The phone rings. And I'm going to pick this up. And it's George Steinbrenner, which is not a real opportune time to be on the phone. And he said he is absolutely apoplectic about a media story that's unfolding in New York. He wants to issue a press release, and he says, now, this is what I want to say. And I'm standing in the shower without my glasses, trying to like take this in. And so I have no pen and paper, and my only solution is to write on the mirror, which is steamed. So he's like, "You say this." Da, 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 da. So I'm writing this, and now he's long-winded, and it's going, and I'm like freaking out a little bit, and it's starting to drip. So I crank the hot water all the way up and open the curtain, so it's really steaming. And I'm reading, "Read this back to me." So I read it back to him. He says, "Okay, put this out." So he hangs up, immediately run out of the room, write it down on a piece of paper, and get the press release issued. But it's when I started to learn to be resourceful in that job.
That's pretty amazing. I've got a little Steinbrenner story myself. In my years with the Phillies, we were just across Tampa Bay from what is now known as George Steinbrenner Field in Tampa. And I used to drive over there in my car, and I would purposely do that on the spring training road trips. I would leave about a half hour after the bus. That way, in case anyone left anything behind, or sometimes the pitching coach would have to stay behind and watch a couple guys throw, and he'd need a ride or whatever the case may be, I would drive over a little bit after the bus left. Mm-hmm. And so I pulled in the parking lot, which was down the left field line over there. And they had this heavily mirrored glass guard shack. So I pull up, and I was not expecting, when that sliding door to open, George Steinbrenner would be there with a clipboard. But he was, and he was checking off cars coming into the parking lot. Now, this was, decades into his ownership with the Yankees. So, he asked me my name, and I showed him my credential, and he looked at the list. He goes, "Oh, yes, right here." He goes, "Park over there," and he motions for me where to park. And I said, "Okay, thank you, sir." And as I'm pulling away, I heard him laying into the parking lot attendant about, "This is how I want things done around here." So I got my own little experience too, but your story has always made me laugh, and thank you for sharing it. That's a classic.
Absolutely. He was, he was tough, Frank, but he wanted to win. I give him credit. He wanted to win. He wanted the business running a certain way. And if it meant leading by example, he did. He was a little out there at times, but I really learned a lot. And you know this, Frank. You learn from every job you have, and I learned a lot from him. Would I want to work for him again? Probably. I know he's deceased, but probably not. But I did learn a lot.
It's funny. One of my counterparts there, one of the Kakuza brothers in the clubhouse, told me, he goes, "I've probably been fired 8 or 9 times over the years." And I said, "Well, what did you do?" He goes, "I just came in the next day." And I said, "So what, did you ever not come in?" He goes, "Yeah, one time I didn't come in." And he, a few hours into the day, he called me and wanted to know where the hell I was and get my so-and-so to the ballpark. So I guess you were only fired for a few hours, but you were fired.
Yeah, it was. You learned that it was like in some levels, I guess, a badge of honor. But he fired me a couple times, and the first time I didn't come in, and the same thing. I mean, where are you? I'm like, "I'm home. I was fired." He goes, "What are you talking about? Get into work," kind of thing. So second time, I just went in the next day, and it was like nothing had happened.
So you remained in that job with the Yankees until 1994, and then you switched gears completely for a little bit. You joined the World Cup organizing committee for soccer. Were you still living in New York during that time?
I was, Frank, and I had loved my tenure with the Yankees, but I desperately wanted to try something different. I didn't know what, but it was time, and the World Cup came knocking. It's the same tournament that'll be here next summer, and it was a chance to do something even bigger. And I wasn't a big soccer guy. Walking around the clubhouse, nobody knew what the hell I was doing or where I was going. They didn't understand it because soccer wasn't really that big a deal in the United States in '94. No. But it was a chance to build their I'm going to date myself, but their dial-up bulletin board system, which predated the internet, but it basically connected all the venues with all the content and things like that. And And I learned a lot and I loved it. And I knew I wanted to be back in baseball, but having that opportunity and going from thinking that, opening day at Yankee Stadium is big, 200 media, maybe 20, 25 camera crews, to credentialing media from 191 countries with a broadcast center operating 24/7 for a month was pretty big. And so I learned a lot from the World Cup and was able to take that experience with me.
So you basically had to stay awake for 30 days. You couldn't sleep or anything. If you're going around the world, somebody's up and working at all times.
Pretty much, Frank. It's like we say in baseball, you can sleep in November. The same kind of deal with this.
Yeah, that's true. So now, later in '94, you get an opportunity to move to Cooperstown, New York, and to start working with the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, that had to be complete culture shock to go from the Big Apple to Cooperstown, which I describe as Norman Rockwell come to life. Talk about the differences.
Yeah, and I almost thought that Andy Griffith was our sheriff there for a while. A small place, but Cooperstown is beautiful. And, when I went up to interview, I had been on this, going like mad since I graduated college, just nonstop as you do. And all of a sudden I'm getting interviewed in this really beautiful place, north of Manhattan. And I absolutely loved it. And, the idea of doing something proactive with the sports history as opposed to reactive with trying to put out fires with everything that just was happening every day with the Yankees was attractive at that point in my life. And I said, you know what? I think I could do this. I think I can move up there for a year. I was recently married at that time and thought that would be a really good way to, at least slow the train down a little bit until I figured out what would be next. And, that 1 year turned into 26 years. And being in Cooperstown was really, really great. It was a great place to live. It was a great place to work. And there's nothing more special than the Hall of Fame, which because you visited me like 6 times, I think.
More. I've been there. Luckily, I've been there over 20 times. Now, not always with you, but I like the place. I can't. Anytime there's a reason to go, I'm in.
So my very first day was, which was great, was the '94 induction. That was my first day with the Hall of Fame, and it was meaningful to me because Phil Rizzuto, who I worked with the Yankees, was going in along with Lefty, Steve Carlton and Leo DeRocher posthumously, and it was just I knew I was in the right place, and I was off and running at that point.
So the first job there, you were director of public relations and promotions. That was just a start, and we're going to go on with the rest of this, but we're going to take a short break. So we'll be back with Jeff Idelson in just a minute. All right, we're back with Jeff Idelson. Jeff, let's continue with your role there in Cooperstown. Talk about your first job, some of the duties of that job, and then we'll move on as your career advanced.
It was super exciting for me, Frank, because I was going to this really well-run family type of organization. They only had like 40, 35 employees. It was like when you probably started with the Cardinals and when I started with Boston. It was you knew everybody and it was small. But they had very little in the way of PR. So anything that I suggested they loved. And it was such a great feeling to feel like I was helping make a change and hoping to grow popularity. Now, obviously, starting in the middle of a work stoppage is, and when you work for a museum that promotes an industry that isn't going on, is a tad challenging. But it was, right away I knew I was in the right spot, and I love just getting the attention back on the Hall of Fame. Sharing the stories, being a storyteller for who these Hall of Famers are beyond the playing field. I mean, we all know everybody's stats, but who are they as human beings? And I think just trying to take my love of the game as a fan first, as you are, we're both fans, but realizing I now have this opportunity to share what I'm getting with everybody else was really, really meaningful, and I loved it.
Well, Cooperstown, very special place, means so much to me. That was the last summer vacation that I ever took with my parents. Unfortunately, my mother got sick a couple months after we returned back home to Illinois, and she didn't make it more than about another year, and sadly passed away. But I'll always remember that trip, and my dad was such a great baseball fan, and he used to talk about Babe Ruth, who he saw play 12 times in person. His father worked on the railroad, so my dad was able to get a family pass to travel back and forth between St. Louis and Chicago and New York on the train, and he saw Babe Ruth play in person 12 times. So the Hall of Fame was always special. He always wanted to take me there, and I don't know what he started, but as I said before, I can't get enough of the place, and I'm glad I've been there for a lot of inductions. Been there sometimes just hanging out with you and your family, and had such a great time. But in '99, you get a promotion to Vice President of Communication and Education. So talk about that just a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, well, yeah. So it's I guess I've been there long enough where I got a promotion, which was great, and gave me an opportunity at that point to really delve into the education part of the Hall of Fame, which is as a museum is a big deal, and Hall of Fame has a great education program, and also part of that responsibility was collecting the artifacts that come into the Hall of Fame, the items that are part of the game's history. And boy, you and I have a lot of history and some very funny stories. Man, I think of some of that Phillies World Series, that first one, when they won. But yeah, I mean, really building the museum's collections became an even more significant part of what I was doing as when I got promoted to VP.
So 9 years later, you get promoted again. This time you went from peanut vendor to president of the Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. And I got to tell you, I was proud for you. You must have been so proud and excited to take on that big role.
Yeah, I think proud for sure, and certainly stunned. And I'm sure you were stunned too, wondering what the hell I was doing. But that's because we're friends. But I had no idea, Frank, that might come, and never aspired to it or really thought about it. But I guess they ran out of bodies. They needed someone, and I was still there. So it worked out really well.
You got the perfect guy.
Kind of you to say, but I loved it. And, serving, overseeing inductions, after having been in a support role for the first 14 years, getting to then induct guys that I knew and knew well was great. And then, it started in 2008 with Goose, who I go all the way back with in my Yankee days. And then you had Ricky Henderson and Jim Rice and, guys that, that I had a long history with. It really was, those ones were especially meaningful to me to be able to present plaques to those guys.
So speaking of the plaques, I always wondered this, who does the text on the plaques? Who handles that? Is that your role to do that?
Yeah, when I started in the PR role, Bill Guilfoyle, who hired me, who had been with the Yankees from 60 to 69 and the Pirates from 70 to 78 before going to Cooperstown, he was the one writing the plaques. And he said, yeah, this is now going to be your job to do. And, as someone who had a lot of journalism as a background, it was really exciting to me to have that opportunity. And to boil down, a 20-year career into like 80 words is not easy. But you try to both qualify and quantify why that person's in Cooperstown, so that the viewer or the visitor to come that only has a little bit of time can really have a snapshot and understand, who this was as a person and a player.
So I got a question for you. Who determines and what factors go into what logo a player has on his cap that goes into the Hall of Fame, or it could be a manager if they've been on, more than one team? How does that all come about, and whose final decision is it?
So the Hall of Fame always maintains the final decision. They have to have that ability to do so, as they're the keepers of the game's history. But it's about sitting down with the inductee, Frank, and having, like anything else, having a conversation about what makes sense. At the end of the day, you want the logo should represent where that player made their greatest impact. And if you get into a case where, maybe it was spread out in a meaningful, and you can make a case for multiple cities, you take the player's wishes into consideration. There's also the option of like going no logo. if somebody really can't split the baby. So Greg Maddux wanted to do that because he felt that the Cubs gave him his due, but he set all the records that he did in Atlanta. Tony La Russa, the same thing. How could he say no to Jerry Reinsdorf, who let him cut his teeth, although he had most of his success in Oakland and St. Louis?
Correct. So now there's a couple things that I noticed just having been a frequent visitor up there that I noticed that I think happened during your watch, having that separate ceremony for the Frick Award. It was known as the Frick Award back in those days for the broadcaster, and the Spink Award for the writer. You had that at Doubleday Field. I think that happened while you were president, correct?
It did. We wanted to we wanted to really make the weekend a little bit more robust and also give the writers and broadcasters their own stage, along with other contributors to the game. So we honored Kurt Flood, 1 year as an example, for his contributions. We developed the Buck O'Neill Award for individuals who aren't Hall of Famers that make outstanding contributions to the game. So what it did was it kept Sunday just for the players and the Hall of Famers, and Saturday became a huge awards program, which they now do at Glimmerglass Opera, just a little bit up the road from the Hall of Fame.
I miss that Doubleday Field one, and I don't know why they changed it. Doesn't matter, but I thought that was a heck of an idea, and kudos to you for coming up with it. Also, that parade, they didn't always have that parade down Main Street, did they?
No, we developed that the same year. I think we split it off. We did the parade as well because, all right, you have this event, you have all these fans there. The players then, as tradition on Saturday night, go to a reception at the Hall of Fame anyway. So rather than put them on buses or in trolleys, why not put them in the back of Ford F-150 pickup trucks and let the fans enjoy them? So that became that's been about 15 years now that the parade's gone on. It's not a very long parade, as you know. You could probably hold your breath for the length of it, but the players love it, and they all stop and sign autographs at the end, and it's really a throwback type of thing, and emblematic of small town living.
Almost like a red carpet too. When they get to the steps of the Hall of Fame, they're announced and they walk in and the fans are just going crazy. It's really exciting. Excellent idea. Gotta love that. So talk about a little bit. I know you can talk about the percentage of items that the Hall of Fame has in total, and how much is really on display, and do they rotate the displays around?
Yeah, so Frank, any museum that's a serious museum, like the Hall of Fame is, like the Met in New York, Philadelphia Museum of Art, all of these museums have deep collections because you need to be able to rotate what's on display because everything has a shelf life, like we do. So do objects. And, if you leave things out for, at least I think, if you leave things out for too long, the environment will start to deteriorate. Colors that dry them out, things like that, especially textiles like uniforms and gloves. So probably I would say the Hall of Fame has between 10 and 15% of what it has in its collections on display at any one time. Again, constantly rotating so that the artifacts can be around in perpetuity. You go into the 19th century gallery in the museum, Frank, and you see uniforms, trophy baseballs that are gilded and in gold that are in mint condition because the museum has taken such good care of them for so long.
Yeah, excellent. That museum, fans, if you're anywhere near Cooperstown, if you've been there, you already know, but it's always changing, the displays, and if you haven't been there, it's a must-do for any baseball fan. So now, Jeff, we'll talk about after you leave the Hall of Fame, which you left in 2019, I believe. You did return briefly for one induction as an interim president, but you and your partner, Gene Fruth, established what's known as grassroots baseball. Get into that and talk about that a little bit and explain the purpose of it. And I want to ask you a couple of things about it.
Absolutely, Frank. So as I was getting ready to retire from the Hall of Fame in 2019, Gene Fruth, a preeminent sports photographer, had just completed a book called Grassroots Baseball, Where Legends Begin. And basically, it's one of the things, she's a phenomenal professional sports photographer, but she loves glorifying kids and making them look like heroes in a big way. And so she put together this beautiful photography book from around the world. And I helped her. She wanted to have Hall of Famers introduce each chapter. If a Hall of Fame were from these areas where were from. So there's a chapter in Austin that Nolan Ryan opens. There's a chapter in Oakland that Ricky Henderson, Vladdy Guerrero, Wade Boggs, all these guys, Craig Biggio. And she said, this book has been so fun. What do you think about turning that concept into a not-for-profit? You're getting ready to retire. Would that be interesting to you? And I said, absolutely. It'd be a really great way to give back. So we developed Grassroots Baseball in the spring of 2019 to give back to the sport, Frank, by shining a spotlight on underserved communities to help grow the game. And first project we did was along Route 66, which I know is near and dear to your heart as a Midwesterner. Runs from Lakeshore Drive in Chicago all the way to Santa Monica, through 8 states, and we did clinics with boys and girls clubs all along the way through all 8 states. Rawlings came on, and through sponsorship we had with a couple of ball clubs, the Diamondbacks and Padres. We were able to give every kid a brand new glove. We were able to bring in players and regular players and Hall of Famers to lead these clinics. Guys like Billy Hatcher, who grew up in Williams, Arizona, to George Brett, who grew up in El Segundo. And so all these boys and girls clubs kids not only got a lesson and an introduction to the game, but they went home with a glove for the first time in their life. And it was a great way to promote the amateur game along the Mother Road.
And you were the bus driver all the way, every mile of that's my understanding, motorhome, correct?
Frank, it was we wanted to do it authentically, so we got a Coachman Galleria, an RV, loaded it up with baseball gloves, balls, and bubble gum from our friends at Big League Chew, and basically went across the country. Marriott came on as a sponsor, so they let us park the RV at different Marriotts along the way. But yeah, we did it authentically. I drove all 2,498 miles in each direction, and Gene sat in back and edited photos for months and months.
Wow. What a trip. What a trip.
It was great. It was awesome.
Fantastic trip. You ran, you went to all those cool places, little places along the road, and Mickey Mantle's boyhood home. And I think you had the Commerce, Oklahoma high school baseball team helping you in one event there, didn't you?
You're good, Frank. Yeah, we worked it out with the coach to have, where Mickey went to high school, to have his high school team out in front of his childhood home. And so Gene shot this ridiculously cool photo of like all of these kids on the property. And yeah, he had a little house right by, it was walkable to the high school, Frank. That town makes Cooperstown look like a metropolis. And his grandfather and father would throw left-handed and right-handed, and he learned to switch hit right at the house. And anything below the window was a single, above the window was a double, on the roof was a triple, over the house was a home run. So,
well, he went over the house a lot of times. There's no doubt about that. So yeah, another book on Route 66, and then recently a third book, correct?
Third book. So as we finished the Route 66 project, we came to the realization that we didn't have a lot of girls in the book. And, you would get there's a girl on that Little League team, and you might want to go because she might pitch if you pay attention. It's that kind of she might get in the game, and we, there was a lot of that going on. But then we shot a Baseball for All game, and Baseball for All is a national organization that gives girls the opportunity to play baseball with teams of girls. The Little League accepts girls, but they don't have all girls teams in Little League yet. Hopefully that's coming. But Baseball for All has been doing this for years and growing the girls game. And we asked them, would you potentially have a game anywhere along Route 66? Sure enough, they had one in Santa Monica. When we got there, it was a whole different vibe. It was obvious that these girls don't get a lot of attention. And the conversation, they were probably 13, 14, middle school age. And the conversations were, do I dare try out for my high school team? Will the coach even look at me? Will I get a chance? And we said, there's a bigger story here that probably needs to be told. So We shifted and made the move to promoting girls and women in baseball, produced a documentary and a book on the global story of girls and women baseball on and off the field around the globe. And yeah, that's where we headed next.
Talk about the documentary, See Her, Be Her. My wife, Kathy, and I were fortunate enough that you invited us to Philadelphia for one of the screenings, and you had a nice panel of ladies there afterwards to talk about girls and women in baseball in particular. Talk about that documentary, if you would.
Yeah, so we thought we were going to do a documentary on women's baseball in the U.S. because so much was going on, over the last 5 years with Alyssa Nacken becoming the first coach, a couple of women groundskeeper, Kelsey Whitmore playing professionally in the Atlantic League with the Ferry Hawks, and we thought we could do a book on women's baseball in the U.S. What we learned is that the global footprint is huge. It's so much bigger than the U.S., and it's a much bigger story. There are 25 countries that have national teams, and we decided that, we need to really tell this global story if we're going to increase the opportunities for girls in the U.S. because we're not doing it as well as other countries. And so we narrowed it down. We focused in on 6 countries, all of whom were going to be playing for the Women's Baseball World Cup. They have a World Cup every 3 years. And then we picked a 7th country, Uganda, which had an emerging women's baseball program growing like crazy and really was going to become the essence of See Her, Be Her, meaning they want to have a team. And if you can see it, you can be it. So USA, Canada, Japan, Korea, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Uganda are all featured in this film. 7 women from the 7 different countries who are not only incredible athletes, but exceptional human beings that really their greater goal is to grow the game. Do they want to win the World Cup? Do they want to win for their country? Absolutely. But the greater goal is growing the game bigger. South Korea's got 50 women's teams that play all the time, Frank. And Japan, all girls teams start in junior high school. So, the U.S. can learn from this. We're really pleased with the documentary. We shot it on 3 continents in those 7 locations. We shot nearly 600 hours, boiled it down to 2 hours, and premiered on the MLB Network between games 2 and 3 of the World Series last year, and now streaming on Amazon.
Excellent movie. If you get a chance to watch it, I highly recommend that you do. We were fortunate enough to be there, and we loved every bit of it. So now, you mentioned Alyssa Nacken. I read online yesterday that she interviewed for the Giants' managerial job. And there's been a female general manager, Kim Ng. We had a female umpire this year. Times are changing, buddy.
They are. Jen Powell, of course, finally broke the chalk line, shall we say, and we have a woman umpire. And that's an area, especially that there's no reason there can't be more. You look at the other sports like football and basketball, the other major sports, and there are women officials. So there's no reason that can't happen. And yeah, it's growing. And we Little League now has the Maria Pepe tournament, so you're seeing more girls playing. You're starting to develop a pipeline. As a result of our film, the best player in the world, Ayami Sato, was brought into Canada this summer, and she became the first woman to pitch professionally in men's baseball in Canada. And a league is now coming out next year, the Women's Professional Baseball League, the WPBL. They announced their intentions on the heel of the film coming out, and have already had their tryouts. So I'm excited about that as well.
That's going to be interesting, very interesting and exciting experience next year, and hopefully that'll all go well. I know Danae Benitez, you had her. She's the starting catcher for the women's national team. You had her there in Philadelphia and some of the other cities after you had the screening of the film. And I know she tried out for that league and will probably sign with them. And, I know a lot of people know who Mo'Day Davis is or was when she was a Little League star. And I see she's dusting off the cleats and the glove, and she's going to try to play professionally also, and we wish her the best. But Jeff, you never run out of ideas. So now the latest thing, and this is the very latest thing, and I think this all probably stems from your great relationship, not only with this guy, but all the Hall of Famers. You have recently been named the executive director of the Say Hey Foundation, the Willie Mays Foundation. Talk about your role with them.
Yeah, this just came in the last few weeks, and a lot of people don't know how what kids meant to Willie, but they always have meant a lot to him. Stemming back to his upbringing in Birmingham, which was challenging. He was raised by his dad. His mom took off, and it was his aunts and uncles and people around him that really helped him achieve success, and he never has forgotten that. And he made it his intentions in his later years of life that he wanted to have a foundation that gave kids an opportunity to give kids opportunity. And he passed last summer. The foundation's been around for about 20 years, and I got asked to join just 2 weeks ago, and I'm honored to do so. We have projects in San Francisco with field projects that are going to be developed. We're developing shortly in conjunction with the Giants. In Birmingham, Alabama, we'll do work where he grew up, and in New York, where he played for a long time as well, and a lot of his younger years. But I often say, Frank, as we get older, we get remembered for different things. And we worked with Billie Jean King, who was our executive producer for the film, and wrote the introduction to Jean's book. And it's funny, most people today, younger people today, think of her, which she is, as a champion for gender equity. But they don't even know that she played tennis, and she was number one in the world for an awful long time.
Long time.
And I'm just thinking that in the next 10 or 20 years, people aren't going to forget Willie Mays, but they're going to certainly understand the impact he's had on children.
Yeah, and you just like in Cooperstown, they got the perfect guy for this role. You're going to be an outstanding representative of that foundation, and really looking forward to seeing all the great things you'll bring to it. Jeff, we could talk all day, man. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for being our guest, and we'll look forward to catching up again real soon. I'd just like to remind everybody, please like, follow, and subscribe to the Fans First Sports Network and our show here, Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks, and we'll be back next week with another exciting guest. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks with Frank Coppenbarger. Tune in next week for another great episode on the Fans First Sports Network.